Okay, so now that you've watched the video on hibernation and you know a little bit about it, let's go ahead and read part of this book called It's Not Just Bears. In this book, we're going to learn even more about hibernation. So some of it will be a little bit of a review from the video. It says, what is hibernation? We'll learn about box turtles, snakes, bees, groundhogs, chipmunks, and bats. And then, of course, our last page is the glossary. Pause this video for a second to tell me what the glossary means. Good, you should have said that the glossary, if I go to page 8, means it's just the page where they give us what certain words mean, okay? It's kind of like at the dictionary of the book. All right, so let's start at the beginning. What is hibernation? I'm just gonna kind of skim over this page since you just listened to the video. I won't stop too much to talk about it. It says, I bet that you already know that hibernation is a long rest period where an animal is dormant. Dormant means, let's go to our glossary, slowing down the physical functions of the body, like in a deep sleep. Okay, so they're not moving very much. They're dormant. But do you know why animals hibernate? Animals participate in hibernation mostly because food is scarce during the winter. That means that they don't have a lot of food during winter, so they sleep for a long time because they're not going to be able to eat. Hibernating helps them to survive the cold and dark winters. Many people automatically think of large brown bears when they think of the word hibernation. While this is certainly true, there are many other animals that hibernate. When a reptile goes into this dormant state, it is a little bit different than when a mammal does. A mammal is like a bear. So you will often see this process called a brumation. This just means the reptile is very still, but not necessarily sleeping the whole winter like a bear. Okay, so a bear, you can see in this picture, the bear is actually sleeping. Okay, his hibernation looks like a very long sleeping nap. However, if you have like a reptile, like a lizard or a bearded dragon, when they hibernate, they just are very still. They don't necessarily sleep the whole winter like a bear, but they don't move a whole lot. They kind of save their energy. Okay, let's read about a couple of animals. Let's go to box turtles. Here's a picture of a box turtle. I want you to listen very carefully for something that you didn't already know about these turtles. And, sorry, I'm trying to look for the page where we are writing this stuff on. Okay. So while I'm reading, I want you to be open to this page. It says H is for hibernation. And you can see a big H here. And this page is kind of like a Venn diagram. Remember that thing we made? We just made one last week or earlier this week of like the two circles. Actually, it was last week when we talked about Hanukkah. It's two circles, and then on each side you can compare different things, and then in the middle you talk about how they're the same. This is like the same type of thing. It's just a different looking chart. So here it says animal, similarities. So on the sides here, we're going to talk about a certain animal and a different animal, and we're going to tell about how they're different in these two boxes. Okay? And in the middle here, we'll talk about how the animals are the same. So let's look at, let's see, you know what I think? Let's go back to the front. So we have lots of options. We have box turtles, snakes, bees, groundhogs, chipmunks, and bats. I think that for this lesson, we will read about, let's read about snakes. And And let's read about bats. Snakes and bats. Let's see how snakes and bats are different and how they're the same. Okay, so I'm actually going to skip this box. Let's go just to snakes. All right. Do you like snakes? Some people really like snakes. Some people really don't like snakes. Here it goes. It says, as you know, snakes are cold-blooded, which means they aren't able to set the temperature of their bodies. So snakes, when they're in the cold weather, their body gets very cold. And when they're in the warm weather, their body gets very warm. Their body temperature changes with the weather outside. They need the sun for warmth. During gloomy, cold winter days, they will burrow underground where it's still cool, but not as cold as when the air is touching their skin. Snakes can go a very long time without eating. They slow down their hearts and how fast they use up their food sources. Oh, that's interesting. So snakes, when they know they're not going to get a lot of food, they slow down their hearts and they slow down how fast they process their food so that they don't have to eat as much. Some snakes in very cold climates burrow underground in community dens. There can be dozens and even hundreds of snakes in one den. Ooh, would you like to come across one of those underground dens? I don't think I would want to see hundreds of snakes gathered together. When they don't go into a deep sleep, while they don't go into a deep sleep like the brown bear, they do go into a dormant state. Okay, so they do hibernate. They don't, go to sleep like we see the bear doing here. When we think of hibernation, usually we think of sleeping. Snakes do not necessarily sleep. We talked about how reptiles just kind of slow down. A snake is a kind of reptile, and when they hibernate, they just get very still. They don't have to eat because they slow down their hearts, and they just stay underground. Even though they're underground and it's still cold, it's said that the snakes are warmer underground. The temperature of the underground is still not as cold as the temperature in the air. So even though it's still cold underground, it's not as cold as they would be if they were out and about in the cold air. All right, so there's snakes. Now I can't really write anything on here yet about my snakes because I don't know about the bats yet. I need to figure out their differences before I can write anything down. So save your paper. Let's flip to the page about bats. Ooh, this one's a long one. Okay, here we go. Bats. Look at that cute little chipmunk on the other side. So cute. Here's bats. Like bees, different species of bats don't all do the same thing to survive in the winter months. Some hibernate, some migrate, and some bats even do both. So some bats hibernate. We know what hibernate means. Some bats migrate. That means kind of like birds. Birds, when it gets cold, they fly south. They fly to where it's warm. Bats do the same thing. If there are bats in cold weather, they either hibernate or they fly south for warmer weather. And then it says some bats do both of those things. Bats that do hibernate, like the little brown bat, may enter a dormant state for up to 6 months. His period of hibernation is this long because he's waiting for the supply of insects to increase. His heart rate will slow down from 200 to 300 beats a minute to only 10 beats per minute. Ooh, I heard something similar to the bats and the snakes. Did you hear it? Do you remember Listen again. It says his heart rate will slow down from 200 to 300 beats per minute to only 10 beats per minute. Do you remember talking about the snakes? The snake's heart rate also slows down, remember? And they don't process their food as quickly. That's something that's the same. Their heart gets slower when they hibernate. He can even go several minutes without breathing. Wow. Bats choose where they hibernate based on how much they will be disturbed. Abandoned buildings, caves, and old tree trunks are popular locations. You and your pets have shelters to help you survive in the winter. But most animals do not have this luxury, so they have to adapt. What other animal adaptations do you know about that help animals survive harsh seasons? All right, so let's go ahead and write both of those animal names on my paper, on your paper here. There we go, to make it not blurry. So one animal that we read about was the snake, and the other animal was the bat. Let's write snake at the top here. And on the other side, we'll write bats. Okay, pause the video so you can write, and then come back when you're ready. All right, so since we already kind of talked about the similarity, let's go ahead and write that first. Do you remember what we said? What's the same about bats and snakes? Right, you should have said what's the same about them is that their heart rate both slows down, right? I'm going to do one of those little bullet points to show that I'm writing a new point. And I'm going to write heart slows down. Heart slows down. Okay, go ahead and pause me if you need to. There's one more thing that both bats and snakes do, and that's what this entire book is about. This whole book is about hibernation. Snakes and bats both hibernate, don't they? Yeah, they do. The snakes hibernate in the way that they just slow down and they get still. And bats hibernate in the way that they actually do go to sleep. Okay, so they both hibernate, even if they do it in different ways. Now, let's think about some things that are different between bats and snakes. The first thing I think about is the place that they hibernate. Do you remember when we read the snakes, where the snakes hibernate? Where do they go to hibernate? Pause the video while you answer that question. You should have said that they go underground, right? Sometimes they go in a whole underground community with lots of other snakes. But either way, snakes go underground, either by themselves or with other snakes. So I'll write underground. Underground. That's a little dash because I didn't quite finish the word. Underground. And on the other side, go ahead and pause me if you're not ready to write. But for the bats don't hibernate underground. Do you remember what I said for bats? I'll read it again. It says, abandoned buildings, caves, and old tree trunks are popular locations. So do the bats hibernate underground like the snakes do? No, they find different places to hibernate. So I'm gonna just write one of these. You could either write abandoned buildings, or you could write caves, or you could write tree trunks, or you could write all three if you wanted. I'm just gonna write the word caves. I don't need to write all three. So bats go to caves where snakes go underground. Okay? Okay. So I think I can think of one more way that they're different. And this is in that the way that they hibernate. I'm going to write this one down here. So we talked about how snakes, when they hibernate, do they go to sleep? No, they just get still, right? They get very still so that they're not using their energy. So over underneath snakes, I'll write still. They're very still when they hibernate. And bats, when they hibernate, they do go to sleep. So I think over on bats, I'll write sleep. Okay. Pause this video if you need more time to write. The next thing that we are going to do is talk about our drawing. So we have a directed drawing today. I'm going to go ahead and rip this out. You're going to need this page here. And you're going to need one more page, animals that hibernate. Okay. It sounds like Cooper is pretty upset. I'm not sure if you can hear him. I'm going to go check on Cooper. I'm going to make a second video for this, so when you're ready to do your directed drawing, go ahead and click on the second YouTube link. Thanks, guys.